Andrew Lelling, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Massachusetts, is with us in studio this morning. Let's go on the record. Appointed by the Trump administration, Lelling has pushed back hard on the state's liberal law enforcement policies, from varsity blues to his support for ICE. He's made headlines, but with a change in the White House, we ask the question, what's next? Let's go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Welcome to OTR. I'm Ed Harding, along with News Center 5's political reporter Janet Wu. And joining us in Studio C this morning is U.S. Attorney Andrew Lelling. And as you can see, as always, we are respecting all social distancing protocols. We have ample distance between all three of us. Mr. Lelling assumed the office nearly 3 years ago and has made quite the impact on Boston in that time. It is great to see you, and just maybe the first to say happy Thanksgiving, because we're actually approaching Thanksgiving. Too. Great to see you.
Thanks for joining us. Just before the election, you appointed one of your assistants to lead the monitoring of election integrity at the polls. First of all, did you find any irregularities? And more importantly, do you support President Trump's insistence that the election was a fraud and that votes were lost or others were illegal?
Well, I can tell you that in the four corners of the state of Massachusetts, my responsibility, we didn't find any significant election irregularities. Sometimes small individual cases come up. So, for example, you saw reported in the paper the individual who lit a ballot box on fire. I think it was near Copley Square a few weeks ago. That sort of thing. But we didn't see anything systemic or anything that would have affected the tally of the vote in Massachusetts.
And what about President Trump's insistence that the election was a fraud? Do you support him in that?
I'm going to keep my comments to the four corners of, the part of the country that I deal with, right, which is the District of Massachusetts. I can tell you it sure looks like Joe Biden won the election. I think the president's entitled to his day in court, and that's happening, and that's the system working. And then at some point, the various states will certify their vote totals, the Electoral College will do its thing, and there will be a president on January 20th.
Are you pretty confident that everything will happen on time and on schedule as dictated by the calendar and by the laws?
Do you mean locally?
And across the country.
Well, I mean, I know what I see from TV, like you, and so it appears that overall nationwide, the election proceeded as it should have. Again, the president says he has evidence of widespread election fraud. This is why you have a court system, and we'll see what happens.
All right, the next item I'd like to talk about is the success that you've had with the varsity blues cases, parents trying to bribe their kids and get their kids into expensive schools. The latest example is Harvard's former fencing coach allegedly selling 2 spots to a businessman's sons. The universities involved deny any knowledge of these schemes, but are these practices, and I understand that, and it might get too legally complex here, that this specific avenue is not in your purview, but let me talk in the grand picture here. The universities involved deny any knowledge of these schemes, but are the practices common at many top-level schools that you've discovered?
I think these kinds of admissions issues, I think it's more widespread than people thought it was. I think that's the fairest way to put it. They're, based on the varsity blues case, and the facts that came out of that, and the commentary and other internal reviews other universities have done since we broke this case, I think what you've seen is that when it comes to sort of second-tier sports, water polo, fencing, volleyball, crew, several others, that there needs to be a little more attention paid within the schools and a little more regulation of what the coaches are doing. I think that has become clear. And so the Harvard fencing case is not factually part of the varsity blues case. The varsity blues case is fraud, et cetera, arising from Rick Singer's operation nationwide with parents and coaches. And the Harvard fencing case is not. But the similarity of the conduct is a reminder that this could be an issue in a lot of schools where you have coaches in second-tier sports, maybe they're not well paid, they're working at prestigious schools where parents really want their kids to get in, and there is a temptation to fraud and corruption in that kind of scenario.
There are faces on the varsity blues case after Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin's experience, and those two have become the faces. Is the moral of this story that it's better not to fight the facts? Whatever the facts are, don't fight them. Admit them, embrace them, acknowledge them?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, everyone we accuse of a crime has a right to force the government to prove its case, and that is as it should be. So I would never sit here and say, look, we said you did it, so just roll over. I would never say that. This is what you have the system for. I think the system has worked well in the varsity blues case. There have been several judges on it. The government has won some battles, lost some battles. Overall, I think the government's allegations have been borne out so far. Remember, there are, Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin may have resolved their cases, but there are still defendants remaining who are entitled to their day in court if they want it. And so I think the pandemic has slowed the pace of that case, but I think over the coming year, you will see it finally resolved.
Well, speaking of the pandemic, given the pandemic, just in your opinion, is a prison term appropriate given the pandemic environment and whatever? Is a prison term appropriate, actually physically going into the structure?
Yes. I think especially now, the prison facilities have done a very good job managing the COVID problem. There's no question that you could be at a higher risk of COVID if you're in a prison facility, but the prison facilities, I think, have successfully mitigated that. And you can see this empirically. After the shutdown happened in March, especially the federal prisons did a very good job sort of retrofitting their procedures to take care of the health and well-being of the inmates. And so you haven't seen a massive surge in COVID cases in our federal prison facilities, nor do I think you will. So yes, I think prison still is in the toolbox for sanctions in our criminal cases, and that we should continue to use it.
Jumping over to another group of cases that you've gone after, but it is something that you have gone after aggressively, are drug traffickers. A few weeks ago, 15 arrests for distributing fentanyl and cocaine. Another tragic statistic this past week is a dramatic rise in heroin deaths. How do you convince the public that these arrests make more than just a dent in the drug problem?
Well, the drug problem has been a massive public policy problem for 50 years. And so what I like to say is what we deal with is the supply side. Unless we go after bulk traffickers of heroin and fentanyl, the street price of those drugs continues to drop and drop and drop, and more people have access to it. That's really all we can do. There also needs to be just as much work done on the demand side, meaning there needs to be services and help and support for people who are addicted to these substances. This problem, far from going away, we made a dent in this problem over the last few years, but the pandemic, I suspect, has ended that. And the opioid epidemic is probably now worse than it ever has been. And those numbers lag the pandemic, lag the shutdown. I think you will see in the coming months preliminary numbers coming out for opioid-related deaths, overdose deaths in 2020, and they're going to be grim. And so I think going forward, on the supply side, the government needs to continue to hammer drug traffickers, and on the demand side, you need more and more money put into public services for people who are addicted to these substances.
I don't want to waste too much time on this, but I think it's sort of common knowledge that for every 15 suppliers that you take off the street, there are probably 30 that come in right behind them to replace them. Is that not true?
I haven't heard that statistic. I don't know that that's true. I'll be the first to say that, the war on drugs has not succeeded in eliminating drug trafficking, nor was it ever going to do that. But people need to understand that cheap lab-grown drugs from Mexico are pouring over the U.S. border. Fentanyl, heroin, of course, but fentanyl and most recently meth. And the least bad option is aggressive enforcement against those who do this. It's insanely lucrative. There's enough volume that it'll drive the street price down to almost nothing. And so it'll be freely available to everybody. And that's the tide we're pushing against. And I think we have to continue to do that. I mean, theft and rape still occur. No one would say we should stop enforcement against those things. Drug trafficking is the same. You've
been a big supporter of ICE arrests of illegal immigrants here in Massachusetts, and Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley joined other voices in questioning the detainment of a man on the streets of East Boston just this week. So can you shed some light on exactly what happened, the particulars here?
I don't have inside information about what happened there. That was a civil arrest by ERO, which is a subset within
ERO
ICE.
Stands for?
I think it's Enforcement and Removal Operations, and that's the group. When people say ICE, they mean ERO. ERO is the group that actually does these civil arrests, and they don't. It's a different agency. They don't answer to us. But you say I'm a supporter of what ICE does. I am, because I'm a supporter of what law enforcement does. And so I think this was a perfect example. If I have it right, this was an incident-free arrest of an individual who was walking down the street. And it's a news story. Why is it a news story? It's a news story because there are segments of the population who are strongly opposed to immigration enforcement. Well, we just had an election. If Joe Biden is sworn in January, he will immediately change the nature of ICE enforcement. It will become less aggressive than it is now. And this is why you have elections. And that's how the process is supposed to work. But I'm not a fan of scoring political points on the backs of law enforcement officers, which is what is happening here. These guys are just doing their job. And best I can tell, it was an incident-free arrest that proceeded professionally and without anybody getting hurt. And so, again, the time will come in the coming months probably when ICE enforcement will radically change. And that's the system working. But don't take it out on the men and women who are just doing their job.